You know, most people think that boundaries are about keeping people out, keeping them away. That's not true, though. What boundaries are actually doors that you create so that you could determine who is going to get in and who is going to stay out, while still being able to connect with others. If you have ever felt guilty for saying no or becoming resentful for saying yes, guess what? This video and this series is absolutely for you. Today, we're kicking off a 5-part journey into boundaries, what they are, why they matter, and how you can finally have that balance between being open and being protected. Welcome back to class. So let's talk a little bit about what boundaries are. And let's start here. Boundaries are those invisible lines that separate you from everyone else. They define where you end and where the other person begins, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. But here's the kicker though. Most people, they don't set their boundaries until it is too late. Or they set them too rigid to where people can't even access them. Do either of those sound familiar to you? Boundaries are not about building walls. They're about building those doors that I mentioned earlier. And when you control that door, you decide who comes in, when, and how far. And why is it that boundaries are challenging to set? I mean, they sound simple, but they're actually not easy to put in place. For some of us, it's guilt. We've been taught that saying no makes us selfish. And for others, it's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, or fear of disappointing someone. And sometimes it's just habit. We've either never placed a boundary, we don't know what they feel like, we don't know what they do, and trying to put them in place is just going to feel uncomfortable. Or we've just had these walls up our entire life and we just don't know how to bring them down. But here's the reality though. When you don't have boundaries, you end up paying the price in silence. Resentment builds in your relationships. Burnout starts to creep in. And you start to lose touch with who you are because you're too busy trying to please everybody else. In this series, we're going to talk about 4 boundary styles. We've got soft, rigid, spongy, and flexible. And that's where this series comes in. If you are a soft boundary style, you often let others decide for you out of fear or trying to avoid conflict. If you have rigid boundaries, ain't nobody going to be able to break through those walls. If you have spongy boundaries, you find yourself bouncing from one to the other, from one to the other, with one to the other, without any sort of consistency. And then finally, there's a flexible boundary, which is the healthiest kind of boundary, because in flexible boundaries, you actually stand at that door controlling who is going to be able to access you and who is going to be kept away from you. And of course, each type has its strengths and its struggles. And over the next few episodes, I'm going to be breaking down one of them one by one. We'll discuss how they show up in real life, what that looks like, the risk that each style possesses, and then how you could shift towards a healthier boundary style, the flexible boundary. But you know what, Susan? From what it sounds like, I've had rigid boundaries and it's worked fine for me because you know what? It's kept me safe. And yes, that's one way to look at it. But boundaries matter because they help shape your relationships with others, even with yourself. They help shape your confidence, your stress levels, and even your success at work. Think about it. Without any boundaries, if you have not set any boundaries for yourself, you're going to overextend yourself and you're going to burn out because you can't say no. If you hold on to rigid boundaries where nobody has access to you, you're going to keep pushing people away. But with flexible boundaries, you get the best of both worlds. You're able to honor yourself while still being able to develop those deep connections with those around you. When you learn to set boundaries, you're not just protecting your energy, you are also inviting the right people to come around you because they know exactly where they stand with you. And that creates trust and respect and just overall healthier relationships across the board. So, as we go into this journey, and before we go into the series, as I discuss each one of the boundaries one by one, I want you to think about the 4 boundary types that I mentioned and ask yourself, do you tend to be on the soft boundary side, on the rigid boundary side, on the spongy boundary side, or are you a healthy mix of flexible boundary style? If you think you know which one you are, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear. In the next episode, I'll be discussing soft boundaries, the people pleaser trap, and how to say no without feeling guilty. How exciting is that? If you want to follow this series, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the rest of the series. And again, let me know in the comments, which boundary style do you think you relate to most right now? Remember, boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about making space for the relationships and the peace that truly matter. I'll see you in the next class.